Cool. Everybody, welcome back. Season three. This is our season premiere. We're going to be talking about a classic band for the first episode. This is going to be a classic hard rock band with a super contrarian choice. In fact, I'm not sure if we're doing the wrong series here. I thought might have been the worst album edition. I had to confirm with Martin that we were no, was a regular contrarian episode. So I'm really interested in hearing why Martin picks this album as his favorite Who album or as the best Who album. And I want to hand it over to Martin so he can get this show on the road and we can kind of battle it out and figure it out today.
Yes, big caveat here. I'm definitely not going to call this the best Who album. I am going to call it my favorite Who album because I truly, truly believe this. But this is such a contrarian choice that I do get a lot of ridicule for this. So I'm just going to try justify myself on this. I was even thinking of doing this as a Patreon exclusive thing because it's just too wacky a choice. But it is truly in the spirit of the show. But we'll get to that in a minute. So yes, we're talking about the Who. Just a very brief history of the Who, if that's even possible. Obviously, this is a band that started making all those big records the same way the Beatles and the Kinks and the Stones were doing all this in the 60s. And then they moved with the times into double concept albums, the likes of Tommy and Quadrophenia. They had a massive record with Who's Next, which was a triple platinum album, and then kind of worked their way through the 70s. Some of the albums were thought to be pretty good. Some were not thought to be all that great. We lose Keith Moon. I think it's 1978. Keith Moon dies. But anyways, there's the last album with him is Who Are You? Kenny Jones comes into the band. They do 2 albums, Face Dances and It's Hard. And then the Who just becomes kind of a heritage act. Big, massive touring situation with a lot of different people on stage. Who are all these people, right? But Pete has a solo career along the way. It almost turns into him being more prolific at that. 2006, they put out a pretty wacky, weird, obscure album called Endless Wire. And then just recently, 2019, they came back with WHO, either in caps or not caps or whatever. It's just called Who, right? I'm not a big fan of that album, although I'm a big Endless Wire fan, which is also extremely contrarian, right? That album really got lambasted when it came out. So yeah, that's the Who. John Entwistle, Pete Townsend, Keith Moon, Roger Daltrey, singer. Pete's almost writing almost everything. Roger singing most of the stuff, almost everything. Massive band. You know them, you love them. The Who. All right. So my choice for my favorite Who album is actually, believe it or not, Face Dances. I love Face Dances a lot, and like let me also kind of theme this episode as this idea that we hear a lot, where like, what was your entry point with a band? This happens. A classic example is Black Sabbath, where a lot of people love Heaven and Hell so much, and the Ronnie era, and they think the Ozzy era is just a bunch of wacky hippies making old dad rock. Right. That's a little bit of how I came into the Who, because in 1979, I would have been 16 years old. Everything we loved had to be heavy at that point. And it was like one of these very first bands that I kind of got into. 81, I'm like 18 years old. Sorry. So at that point, there was the last Who album in 78. So I would have been 15. And, there was a lot of, Keith, he's in the news. He's just died. Right. So there's a lot of talk about the Who and what's going to happen with the Who. So, 3 years later, they do come out with this new album finally, and there's a lot of talk about this band still. They turn out to be a pretty big touring act, but I'm getting into the drums. And my horizons are expanding. Punk has gone to post-punk. It's not just heavy metal all the time. And there was just kind of an acceptance point where I'm thinking, oh, let's check out the Who, because the old stuff, was not heavy enough. It was ragged and aggressive and with that shouty voice, and it was weird music. As kids, we just didn't get into it. It was just not heavy metal enough for us. So I was never there for those records. So I'm there for this record. And so there's that massive nostalgic factor that adds to me calling it my favorite Who album, even though I would never call it the best Who album. What I love about this record is I love the first single, You Better You Bet. I love Daily Records. It's one of my favorite Who songs of all time. There are so many lyrics on this album and so many great lines all the time. Like Pete is just like throwing in the cool catchphrases and great standalone short lines all over this thing. Unfortunately, one thing I don't like about it is Roger sings every song on the album except for one. John Entwistle does the quiet one, right? And John Entwistle also wrote the heaviest song in the album, You, and those are my two least favorite songs on the album. But hang on, let me just do a little show and tell here. So yeah, there is my original vinyl copy of this album. Love that cover art. They commissioned all these painters to do these pictures of the band, and it's really cool. The songs are on a little they're on little tubes of paint. It came with this. This is the big Face Dances poster of the album cover, and then it also came with a lyric sleeve where you can see there's definitely a lot of lyrics on this, and they're all, like I say, very compact, action-packed lyrics. Pete wrote every song in the album, like I say, except the two. Roger didn't write anything on it. Kenny didn't write anything on it. And I just love the lyrics. But the other thing I love about this era of The Who, and why it's supported by my love of even It's Hard, which would have been an even more contrarian choice because more people don't like It's Hard. It's Hard only went gold. This one went platinum, so it was a pretty big deal for them. Previous album went double platinum. But what I love about this period is it's just like a glorious Pete suite of records. It's Face Dances. It's Hard. It's Empty Glass, which I think I love even more than Face Dances. And it's All the Best Cowboys Have Chinese Eyes, which I absolutely think is a masterpiece. I love it way more than any Who album. And it's always been like one of my top 30 or 40 albums of all time. I've often mentioned it as up there. So you're getting all these records coming. 78, Empty Glasses, April 21st, 1980. Face Dances is March 16th, 1981. All the Best Cowboys Have Chinese Eyes, June 14th, 82. It's Hard, September 4th, 82. And then White City is a really cool album too. And that's November 11th, 1985. So I just love all this Pete-ness all at this time. I love the fact that it's actually kind of a poppy, light, polite, not hard on the ears, peaceful Who album. I mean, a lot of people don't want that from their Who. They want that, that 4-part personality that includes Keith Moon and Roger shouting away and acoustic songs, mixed up with the aggressive heavy songs. But this has a pretty soft production by Bill. I never know how to pronounce his name. Simchuk. He's done Outlaws and Eagles and stuff. I don't like his productions generally, but this one I kind of like. It is very soft and easy on the ears, granted, but that's fine. I love all the melodic poppy stuff on here. Pete does sing throughout the album, and I absolutely welcome that because I just worship the guy. But it's more like in a co-vocal role or a backup role, or he's just kind of parachuted in here and there. But basically, he says, "Roger, you sing everything on this." That always bugged me about The Who, right? Because I like my lead singer to be the guy who wrote the lyrics in a lot of cases. There's this weird disconnect that I've never been happy with there. But no, just looking at this, Don't Let Go the Coat is a super poppy one, which I really like as well. So You Better You Bet and Don't Let Go the Coat were the singles kind of driving this record. Cash Cast is pretty cool. Like I say, I don't like Quiet One. Did You Steal My Money feels like an old Who by Numbers or Who Are You kind of vibe for them. How Can You Do It Alone is a gorgeous song with just great lyrics. Daily Records, like I say, is one of my favorite songs by The Who of all time. It's just got that kind of regal pomp rock attitude to it. And Another Tricky Day to close the record is also really cool too. On the reissue, they had this song called I Like Nightmares. I Like Nightmares, which Pete sings, which is kind of cool. And then there's this other totally, original song, It's in You. And then they also stuck on a live version of Somebody Saved Me from Pete's Empty Glass album, which has got all this Hey Good Hardy sort of piano in it, which is just ridiculous. But Pete sings that. He sings, I believe he sings on the How Can You Do It Alone from the live thing too. And then there's Quiet Ones. So these were the extra tracks on the 97 reissue. But no, so for those reasons, I always get ridiculed for this. And like I say, I was going to do this as a Patreon exclusive thing because it's just so wacky and off the wall. And I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of comments about it. But no, I'm perfectly fine with this. And like I say, I almost even went with It's Hard because I love the song It's Hard. I love Athena, that single. I've known No War is amazing on here. Eminence Front is an absolute classic. That's probably the most famous song from these two albums, which are really a pair of albums. As you can see, even sort of the coloring of the two records are kind of similar, right? So there you go. Weird choice, definitely strange choice, super contrarian. Like I say, again, I'm not going to call this the best Who album. I'm just this is more going down the road of a personal one where I really can't argue that it is the best, but I'm going to call it my favorite. Marco, tell me how I'm wrong, and I'm sure I am, but go for it.
Yeah, you're way wrong on this one.
Yeah.
And like, I have to admit, I'm not the deepest Who fan. I don't know all the deep cuts from all the albums and stuff like this, but I do, like, did you didn't do the Who on that episode with Pete Pardo where you talked about bands where you only need the greatest hits, did you?
No. Because if I thought about Who and the hits and whether I like the hits or don't like the hits, because we did 2 episodes that are kind of back to each other, one where we hate the hits and one where we like the hits. Yeah. The Who are a band that I would say are right in the middle, where the hits are pretty representative of what they've done across their career. Mm-hmm. So you can't say the hits are stupid songs of theirs or they're absolutely the greatest songs of theirs either.
Yeah, my relationship with the Who is like I had that. What was it like 20th century artists or something? It was do you remember that series of greatest hits? They had the gray cover and they had a bunch of bands.
They all had the Kmart.
Yeah. I had that in high school, and like I was a fairly decent fan of the band, and like I knew all the hits and stuff like this. And I admit I didn't know too much about like all the hidden gems and like deep cuts and stuff like this. So in preparation for this episode, I thought I'm going to get into this album and find like an album that's full of all these hidden Who songs that I never even heard of. Like, I don't think any of these were on that compilation that I had, and maybe find some stuff. And after listening to Face Dances, which was the first album I went back to kind of listen to and research for this episode, I thought like, hey, maybe this is one of those bands where you only need the greatest hits, But I probably think before I comment on all the stuff that you commented on, I do want to go through the track listing of Face Dances. I think probably a couple of the albums that you're going to see that people will genuinely point to is probably the best Who albums. One would be Who's Next. I think there's that's one that there's like 4 or 5 Who hits on that one, right? Like Bargains on that one. Won't Get Fooled Again, Behind Blue Eyes. Like those are like massive Who songs that like everybody knows those songs.
I think that would be most people's choice. And to me, it's their Led Zeppelin 4. It actually came out just a few months apart from Led Zeppelin 4. They're both late 1971 albums. It just feels like that, like the short, everything to the point, like literally half that record, if not 3/5 of that record is some of their biggest hits.
And it's like 40 minutes, right? Mm-hmm. The other album, another album that you'll see is the double album Tommy, right? Which is kind of coming from that psychedelic era, but it's a double album. Again, there's like, there's songs on that one that even when I was in high school, and they did the film Tommy, which I've seen, and I think they had a stage musical and stuff like this, but that was a big success for them as well. That one you see is regarded as one of their better ones. I didn't look at, in the preparation for this episode, I really tried to stick to like my subjective thoughts. I kind of wanted to stay away from maybe looking at all the different critical consensus and all the ranking lists. But after listening to Face Dances, I'm like, am I like way off on this one? So I went and I looked at some ranking lists and stuff like this just to kind of see where I was at with these albums. But I think Tommy was one of them. Tommy and Who's Next were kind of getting actually
Tommy
Who's Next was
me
always
out, man. Tommy is weird. It creeps me out. I'm not a big
Yeah.
Tommy fan. You know, I come on more or less at Who's Next and everything forward. I mean, and then there's those early ones like My Generation, Happy Jack, Sell Out, and all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
Quick one. You know, to me, that's their 60s stuff, and it's just like the Stones. I just don't care. I mean, I come on right when music, you know, blossoms essentially in the late 60s. But obviously, I hope you're going to mention this one because this is probably, you know, Tommy, Who's Next, and Quadrophenia
Yeah.
are the ones that get mentioned the most, right?
Yeah, but in terms of Tommy, just the far-reaching appeal of that one, like Pinball Wizard was a song that I remember, like, like I grew up in the 90s and I went to high school in like the early 2000s. And I remember Pinball Wizard was a song that like people my age knew. And this is like, we're talking 30 years removed from like when this album came out. So that's the far-reaching appeal of some of the stuff coming from Quadrophenia and Who's Next and Tommy and stuff like this. I had never heard anything off of Face Dances before doing preparation for this episode. And like, man, I went back and listened to this and I thought like, are we doing worst of album edition here? Like I thought we were doing the Contrarians. I don't want to be too hard on it. Like I'm not a musician, right? Like these are just kind of like my subjective opinions about it. I disagree with you on the production. There's a lot of things going on with the production that I don't like that really affect my listening experience. There's something going on. Now, I listened to the reissue version that's on Spotify. So I listened with earbuds to the reissue version. I don't know how remixed it is, but there's something going on with the background vocals where like they really pop out, almost like a children's book a pop-out children's book when you open it, those images pop up. Like these background vocals were so jarring to me and they were like almost like interrupting my listening experience. What song do you think on here was the most annoying for me to listen to? If you could guess.
Most annoying to listen to, I would say, is probably "Did You Steal My Money?"
Did You Steal My Money? And you mentioned that song. That made me want to throw my phone at the wall. I listened to that a couple of times and I'm like, how can anybody experience this as a joyful experience? Mm-hmm. Those vocals that kept going around, like I felt like I was having symptoms of psychosis for a lot of these songs because these background vocals were, I don't know if that was just me or just the version that I listened to, but Did You Steal My Money was absolutely frustrating to listen to. Mm-hmm. That was probably the most offensive song on this album. I actually liked the bonus track, It's in You, and I kind of wish that was on the album rather than Did You Steal My Money? And what was also interesting with the way that you had mentioned the track listing was you kind of said your two least favorites, which was The Quiet One and You, were my favorites from this record. I kind of thought if anybody stands out, now of course another hit against this record is Keith Moon's not on it. And his drums, I mean, like, but I'm not going to go too much on that. But I think
Marco, let me just jump in there. I forgot to mention something about the drums, and I should address it because, yes, one of the big problems is Keith's not there. It's Kenny. And what I like about what he does on this is he plays a role which seems like a sober Keith Moon playing on pop arrangements. And I think that's what he does, and he plays that role well. And I do love that there's a little bit of the flourish of the like mini tom-toms and tune tom-toms that go in, which seem a little out of place, but it's almost like an homage to Keith in there. So I kind of like the job Kenny does on here. He looks like a Who guy too. His face looks like a Who guy, just like when Ronnie Wood joined the Stones. I mean, he looks like a Stone, right? So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't really mind, but yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to say that I think if anybody stands out on this one, it's John Entwistle, because I like this. I like The Quiet One, which he wrote and sang, and you said he wrote You as well. That was another one of the ones. That was another rockin' tune that I liked, which kind of like redeemed the album a little bit. The Quiet One, I think, was my favorite off of this. Mm-hmm. Most of the other stuff I either just thought was just kind of like generic and average at best, or super annoying. Even Cash, mm-hmm. like the whispering in the ears with the background vocals was just like, just stop. Like, I just want to hear the song, like, yeah. I don't know if you noticed that too with the background vocals on a lot of these songs. They pop out to where it's like, it's almost like somebody else took the music and recorded them doing these vocals, and they just seem to like not mix well.
It's interesting. I've never thought about this, and I'm hearing this for the first time and kind of trying to process it. And I wonder if what you're sort of getting is an attitude that, you know, Pete's writing all these songs. He's a lead singer on so many Who songs, and he's not lead singing anywhere. So it's more like we need some Pete in there. So it's more like a co-vocal rather than a background vocal, maybe. And people love Pete, and he has a very distinct, very cool voice. I mean, I prefer his singing voice even to Rogers, wow. And I really don't like John Entwistle's singing voice. But so it's almost like it's possible that they're just trying to get that extra personality of some Pete-ness in there, and that's why you're hearing a lot of complex vocals on it.
Yeah, and I kind of disagree about the lyrics too. Like listening to the songs, I went and I kind of looked at some of the lyrics, and it's always different if you just read them like it's just as static words, but I just thought some of it was kind of cringy. But maybe I was just looking for reasons to not like this album at this point. But I'm very shocked that you picked this as your favorite, or that you think this is one of the best. And even just I had to go and do research after and be like, what is there something wrong with my ears maybe? But I noticed that on the rankings list, luckily for this album, they put out that album a couple of years ago, which seemed to move this one up a spot, which I'm not super familiar with that one, but on the rankings list, that was like dead last in like each of the ones that it was at least listed in. But Face Dances was always right at the bottom. It was always, I didn't see it ever very high, ever even like, even it never even reached the middle of those ranking lists. Yeah. And I looked at maybe like 5 best ever albums. It was at number 10. You know what I mean? So like, I didn't look at a ton of them. I didn't do a ton of that kind of research, but it was a platinum selling album. But maybe if you stick Coca-Cola on it, if you stick a brand name on something, people just buy it, right? I don't know.
Well, it's very poppy and accessible. And I guess what we're figuring out here is, I mean, I personally, the mellower the better for my Who, because that leans more into those Pete albums that I love. And I just want to show these. So there's White City, which has got Give Blood on it. This thing is just start to finish amazing. You know, Pete in his major sort of drinking era. And this is just really spiritual and full of amazing stuff on it in terms of like production, complexity and artiness. But yeah, and I just wanted to show these. So there's your It's Hard and your Athena that matches that, and I've got an It's Hard this thing too, and yeah, so that's a very poppy album too. So I guess I love conceptual Who, and I love that whole mod story of Quadrophenia. I mean, that's really close to my favorite Who album as well. And but I'm surprised. Like, I know it's a super contrarian and stupid and ridiculous choice, but I'm surprised it is so low when you say you research the rankings, because I always thought that it was somewhat liked the way it's almost like a little bit of the it's the Deep Purple Perfect Strangers to House of Blue Light parallel.
Yeah. Well, I like
Face Dances to It's Hard, because both were successful and there was the drop in sales by half. Well, yeah, I like Perfect Strangers too, but I thought over time, at least, you know, given that this is now 40 years ago, that Face Dances would have come up in estimation. But I can understand how. I mean, Endless Wire is a really hard album to love. I totally love it, but I can understand why that would be so low. But I would think this would at least be coming up higher than everything from before Tommy. But maybe not, right?
Well, if you had told me this was like your guilty pleasure album, I wouldn't have blamed you one bit.
Yeah. Well, that's really, kind of what it is, right?
Yeah. And I don't know. Again, like the one of the songs you mentioned, Daily Records, like it's almost part of it, and there's nothing wrong with this, but it just, a lot of the songs on these are kind of like poppy, almost Celtic-y kind of folk rocky. Like Daily Records, I thought maybe if I was going to compare it to something, which might seem as an odd comparison, but I was hearing bits of, remember that song, I Would Walk 500 Miles?
Oh, yeah.
That was on the radio quite a bit. Yeah. This Daily Records could have been the B-side to that. You know what I mean? And like, how can you do it alone? That was like, when I used to have an iPod, I used to have a category of like TV show themes. like
Yeah.
WKRP in Cincinnati, and
Totally
Welcome
sounds
Back
like
Cotter.
that. I never thought of that. Yeah.
Welcome Back Cotter and stuff like this. And again, there's nothing wrong with those. I kind of like those poppy songs here and there, right? And I
You're
have
right.
them
You're
on
right
my
about that one. But also the other thing to notice is that song and a bunch of them where the verse might chafe you. There are breaks and choruses and different little bits put in that add this kind of nice melodic counterpoint to some of those things. And then the last thing about that one, I understand that verse. You're right. That's hilarious. It does sound like a TV theme song, but it also has a really cool John Entwistle bass line in it too. Yeah,
Yeah,
and with
he
some
rocks
fuzz
this.
on it and everything, right?
Yeah, I really appreciate him a lot more after listening to this one. Actually, I really think he's the kind of standout guy on this one. I really did like the quiet one. That was one that kind of brought me back up, and I was like, I like this because it kind of starts off loose. It's a little harder. It tightens up a little bit. Like I liked the quiet one. But just overall, and one more thing about production is I kind of think sometimes people might think more is more when really less is more. Like I just kind of think just because you can add piano and stuff like this doesn't mean you should, and doesn't mean it should be all over the place. Because I really kind of thought the piano was even a little distracting in some cases. Not that you can't use piano in a rock album or keyboards in a rock album. I just thought on this album there were times where I'm like, okay, there's the piano there. It didn't really need to be there. I wish Pete's guitar was a little more prominent on some of the places where the piano was.
Yeah.
Roger's vocals were fine. I don't mind Roger's vocals at all. Those are kind of my issues with it. The things I liked about it were less than the things I didn't like about it. There were a couple of things I liked about it. I'm not trying to just bash this record and bash the Who and be disrespectful to this band or anything like this. I just think it's a surprising pick. And if I were to nitpick things, those would be.
Yeah. I mean, really, I think what we're seeing here is an extreme exercise in when we see in the comment section all the time when people bring up an album and they admit or you suspect that it's because it's the nostalgic sort of entry point to the band with them. It's the first one they got into in a big way, or the first time they embraced the band or whatever. That happens a lot across catalogs where you see albums that you go, what is this guy thinking? And then you go, oh, well, he's that age. And so he was 16 at that point, and boom, boom, boom. And it all adds up, right? So I think you're seeing a little bit of that. I love the mention of the guilty pleasure too, because that's kind of what it feels like. And boy, man, I played Endless Wire probably 120 times. Like I love that record. Right. I was going to write a big, long essay about how cool and strange and weird and creative it is. Right. Because it is that. But no, man, I almost would rather have been sitting here talking about Empty Glass and All the Best Cowboys Have Chinese Eyes, because that's and it's hard all as a period.
You had the choice. I didn't force you to pick Face Dances.
I know. I know. And like I say, I almost didn't want to make this an official episode because it's too wacky. So I don't know. Let's see
what we should do. I got an idea for you. We'll upload the same video twice, but we'll put Worst Album Edition at the beginning and we'll put the regular Contrarians at the beginning, and we'll get double views for it.
Hilarious. Yeah.
Thanks. I don't know if Martin was punishing me, but Did You Steal My Money ruined my life for about a week. So I'm going to go curl up in a ball in a hole somewhere and kind of recover from doing this. But appreciate all the subscribers. Appreciate our Patreon subscribers. We have some really cool stuff going on at Patreon. There's some exclusive stuff. Martin's got some video reviews on there. I have a couple of things that I've done. I have a neat little series where I go through where Martin Popoff's guide to heavy metal of the 80s, and I kind of pick out random bands and do quick little reaction videos and rate Martin's review on it, see if I agree or disagree with what he said. If you're a Patreon subscriber, you can recommend bands for me to check out and do reaction videos. We have some behind the scenes stuff on there. We have some other neat little things that are exclusive to Patreon. If you're a fan of the Contrarians and you just want to support, then we appreciate all of that. If you want to head over there, or even if you just like and subscribe to this video, or even if you comment and tell us why we're wrong, and because your comments are valid too. So we appreciate to see the comments, even the ones that disagree with us. We're not trying to aggravate people and make people angry. We're trying to be a little entertaining. We're trying to use some objective facts. We're trying to put on a show for you. So if you like the show, even if you disagree with us, tell us why you disagree with us. And we appreciate all the feedback and all the comments and views and everything. And thank you very much. And welcome to season 3. And hopefully we can keep doing this, and we'll see you later.
That's it, dude.